Welcome back, welcome back. Well, few thought that it would ever happen, but last week Morgan Tsvangirai was finally sworn in as the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, promising a new chapter in Zimbabwe's history. Or hopefully so, because the very next day this new chapter seemed further away again after the arrest of the opposition ministerial nominee Roy Bennett. So is Robert Mugabe, the man who celebrates his 85th birthday this weekend, actually prepared to share power? Joining me now from Johannesburg is Heidi Holland, author of Dinner with Mugabe, and one of the last journalists to have interviewed the Zimbabwean president. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you.
Starting with the basic question, you say in your book, you say you think that the Mugabe machine, the Mugabe government, that they basically, it was year 2000 when it became obvious that things were going seriously wrong, seriously awry, seriously awful. But when do you think he changed? Did he have a mental seizure, a heart attack? Did he have some sclerotic thing? Did he have venereal disease? When did he change?
No, I don't think he's mad. A lot of people think Robert Mugabe is clinically mad. I don't think so at all. He certainly lives in a bubble, a reality bubble, so that he's deluded. But I think he was always a weak man in the sense that he'd come from a very deprived background. He had a very utopian idea of the world, you know, as reflected in Marxism. And he hoped that the way he saw the way forward was to cooperate with the Ian Smith, to cooperate with the British, would produce a similar response in those other parties. But in fact, of course, politics is the rough and tumble. It always was. And the people that he hoped would cooperate with him, notably Ian Smith, who was the leader of the white Rhodesia as it had been, but you know, didn't cooperate with him at all. And I think he just lost his girlish laughter, as it were, very, very early on, as witnessed by that big massacre that occurred in Matabeleland in the early 80s, just a few years after he came to power, albeit that was cranked up by apartheid South Africa. So there were a lot of collusions in Mugabe's derailment, I think. I don't think it's just about one man losing his marbles, to be honest.
But what about that one man today? I mean, as he prepares for his 85th, and all his birthdays seem to have been, at least recently, pretty lavish. You talk about the one 2 years ago, and with the various newspapers saying how many bottles of first-class champagne and lobsters and all of that. Is he aware of the gruesome irony that out there 80%, now up to 94% of his people are unemployed, half of them need food aid? Is he aware of all those things at all, or does he live, as you put it just now, in a total bubble?
Well, I think he lives in a parallel sort of world. You know, he has to see himself as a heroic figure, and meanwhile, he's actually got his finger on the button. I mean, he has outwitted his opponents consistently. But if you look at his birthday, if you have a good look at this man's face when you see him, he's holding balloons in both hands. And if you really look closely at this man, Sir David, you'll see a deprived 4-year-old, actually. So yes, it's true that he doesn't care about his starving people. That's absolutely right. But on the other hand, what you see in his birthday celebrations is actually a deprived 4-year-old having a birthday party that he never had before. I know that sounds pathetic, but have a good look at his face. And it's not an 85-year-old face. So this is an intensely complicated man.
And will this intensely complicated man be able, be willing, want at all to share power with Morgan Tsvangirai? Or will he and his group cadre of henchmen around him prevent that happening?
Yeah, I don't see him sharing power. I think what's happened is he's been forced by the African Union and the regional body, the Southern African Development Community, to share power. The AU told him last year, go forth and share power, or you know, whichever terminology they used, unity government, it varies. And he's done that. But I think he'll now sabotage it, and I think that's what you can see happening now. This is a man who sees himself as a medieval king, Sir David, and to be honest, he's 85 years old. He comes from a backdrop, a tribal, if you like, or ethnic backdrop, which has nothing to do with democracy and the idea that some ballots will be cast and you'll be voted out of power. He'll pay lip service to that, as many African leaders do, but he reckons he'll stay there till he dies.
But I mean, with his strong Catholic upbringing, does he not, do you think, does he not know about all the murders that have been done in his name? Or did he order them? Does he know about them? Does he know that the world reckons he's absolutely proven 100 times over as a murderer? Does he know that?
He denies that. You know, I spent 2.5 hours with him, and he denied that he was a killer. And in fact, I interviewed Morgan Tsvangirai, the leader of the opposition, now the Prime Minister, a few months ago. And he had an hour-and-a-half dinner with Mugabe just before the power-sharing deal actually went forward. And he said Mugabe denied throughout the dinner that he was a murderer. So I think he, as I say, chooses his reality. He lives in this parallel world where he's a heroic figure. He used, in my interview with him, terms like sacrifice and suffering. I've sacrificed and suffered, which are really quite religious terms, you know, sort of martyr-like terms. And I think that's how he sees himself. Meanwhile, of course, he orders the murders. You know, some people say his blood-stained generals are running the show, but I don't think that that's true. I think if that were true, you'd see chaos. You'd see virtually civil war there. But in fact, within a failed state, it is somebody still has his hands on the tiller, and it's Mugabe. I'm sure of it.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for joining us. All the best. See you soon.
Thank you.
This month marks the 30th anniversary of Iran's Islamic Revolution, one of the landmark events of the last century. But what mobilized millions of people to the streets in 1979? Was anti-Americanism or Islamism the driving force? And 30 years on, with Barack Obama in the White House, is the great Satan, what they used to call, perhaps still do, the USA? Is it as reviled as ever now? Joining me now is Alastair Crooke. He's a former undercover agent. He's been an EU advisor, and he's, in addition to all of that, he's managed to moderate more than 7, more than 10, you count them, of truces in the Middle East, which tend not to last very long. That's why he's done so many of them. And he's here with me right now. Are you encouraged with your knowledge of Iran in terms of the words coming out of Tehran and the words coming out of Washington, or not?
I think we have to be very cautious about this, because I think there's a real danger that, in fact, the expectations that are being generated about what may come from this talk or the engagement that Obama is promising with Iran, that it will really actually materialize. Because very often I have found, particularly in the case of Iran, that the West and Iran just talk past each other, and that they're not talking about the same things. And I think what in your lead-in, you said, well, what was the Islamist Revolution? And what did it mean to those tens of millions of people who were energized and really mobilized on the streets of Tehran? And I remember one of the Hezbollah leaders saying to me, when I asked him, what did it mean to you? What was so important about this revolution? And he said, for the first time, we were free to think as Muslims. For the first time, we broke free from that instrumental Western way of thinking, and we were able to use our imagination and our other means of thinking, and that this transformed us politically. Many of those who were on the streets that day still feel that the revolution didn't achieve its ends. This is not the Iran that they have today was neither as free nor as equal nor as just as they sought. And so many of them want to see a new revolution, or at least a further stage of the existing revolution, actually to bring about a better society, to make a society that really is just and compassionate and equitable. And this is part of the Islamist Revolution, it's not just simply anti-West or anti the United States. It is about trying to, if you like, open the question about what is politics, what is the end of society. And that's why Muslims find it so exciting, because it is about rethinking. It's not a sort of just a totalitarian process that's
But
imposed
it is
on it.
undemocratic, obviously. I mean, maybe that's a Western idea that is not viable in Iran. They've never really had a democracy, ever. But they don't want one, do they?
Well, there is a certain, I mean, there's certainly more democracy in Iran than there is in nearly any other country in that region, perhaps, but not entirely excepting Israel. But there is certainly democracy, and there is a vibrant politics. One only has to go to Iran to know that people are talking politics all the time in Tehran and thinking about politics. And like in any society, sometimes you have a sense of empowerment and sometimes you don't.
And just in conclusion, Syria, the latest news on Syria, warm words about getting together again with the United States and so on, having a renewal of recognition and so on. Do you think anything will come of that? I mean, do you think Syria is about to move more into the middle ground and be more influential?
Well, I think certainly Syria is going to become more influential, indeed is already becoming more influential. I think it's changed very much in the last year or so. And what they're trying to do, I think, is to try and begin conversation again, begin politics. We've had 8 to 10 years of scorched earth, of diplomacy in the region, of polarization, of isolation, of demonization. And really what President Assad is trying to do, I believe, is to try and begin politics, start talking politics again in the region. And he believes that Damascus is particularly well placed. It is, if you like, the sort of the portal to these discussions, because Damascus is talking to Hamas, is talking to President Abbas in Ramallah, it is talking to Iran, it's talking to Hezbollah, and it is talking to the Europeans and Americans too. So he believes that this is an important way to actually start the process of conversation. Will it lead to a breakthrough or a solution? I don't know. It may not. And I think he's quite careful about it because there are many trends. We've seen in the trends in Israel, what happened in Gaza, the Israeli elections. I think it's too early to say that there's a possibility of the breakthrough. We'll all have to wait and see how that will turn out. But there are many reasons to see that the other alternative is, of course, that the region could move towards conflict. So I think it's a very important initiative that he's taking.
Thank you very much indeed, Alastair.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Now, Anil Kapoor, one of the shining stars of Slumdog Millionaire, after the break, after the news headlines.